I want to get going, and we have Mary Tedrow coming in a little while to talk with us, a real honest-to-goodness teacher leader from Virginia, so that should be fun. And she's just a pretty amazing and thoughtful person who has this great resume. So let's see, here we go. So I wanted to start by kind of circling back a little bit to last week and ask how many of the things that are bubbling up in your teacher's lounge right now, because we had about a 40-minute conversation last week where people kind of shared what was going on, what were the concerns, what were the great things, what were the beefs and the complaints. And I got some feedback from some of you that, is this what it's going to be like every time? Are we going to just spend all this time being negative? And I wanted to comment on that, to say that I think the best way I can approach that is to quote Michael Fullan. I don't know if any of you have ever read Michael Fullan, but I like his stuff on education leadership a lot. And he's fond of saying, problems are our friends. Problems are how we know what to work on next. If everything is fine all the time with everybody and no one is ever allowed to say, this is not working in my classroom or my building or my division, then we're not going to get anywhere. That it isn't necessarily being negative, but it's being aware of what's going on. So if any of you would like to comment on that, either in the box, the comment box, which I can't see right now, but Kitty can see it, and she can unmute somebody who would like to comment or share a comment that's typed in the box about keeping a positive attitude, but not being afraid to talk about the issues, but not being afraid to think that problems are our friends. So any thoughts on that before we go along?
So Katie Rose is saying, my department tries to hold with the 10 to 90% policy. Talk about a problem 10% of the time. And
what a good idea.
And possible solutions
90%
of the time. That is an awesome idea.
Yeah, a couple of people have mentioned that in the comments. If you've got a problem, that's fine, but then you need to talk about a solution or, my screen is gone. Yikes.
Oh. Scroll down toward
All right, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that. I've got a full screen here, so.
You can go back up to near the top, and it allows you to take the full screen off. There's a little like four arrows in the upper right hand corner. Just scroll around in that area if you see exit full screen.
Okay, I'm okay right now. I just would want to make sure that there isn't somebody who's typing furiously in the chat box or would like their mic.
I can monitor that for you. Now I'll break in. Okay. So Jennifer is saying, I felt our first meeting, it was nice to hear people having some issues and not feeling like I'm the only one in that boat. And then Laura says, I did not think it was negative either. I thought people were voicing concerns about changes and the impacts they have, as well as these being areas that could be changed. And so and if I could just add in, if we didn't think there was something that needed to be changed, if we all thought that everything was hunky-dory, we wouldn't be here, right? So we need to acknowledge that there's a problem before we can attempt to fix it. Stephanie says, I think we are all here because we want to make a difference, which is nice, Lisa.
All right, good. But I also wanted you to know that we're listening to what you're saying about this class. It has to make sense for you too. So here's a couple of thoughts about negativity and problems. And someone, Jennifer, I think it was, who typed into the Facebook page today that she feels like she has nothing to say about testing, and it would be better to test every 2 or 3 years, and the testing is overwhelming and it's not helping. And I thought, okay, Jennifer times 10 million teachers, who feel exactly the same way and feel very, very powerless. So I kind of thought these were some thoughts to share, that sometimes people say, well, there's nothing I can do because, they haven't thought of it yet, or to relieve yourself of responsibility. So, and from the wonderful Noam Chomsky, optimism, unless you believe the future can be better, you're unlikely to make yourself a change agent involved. So, and again, these slides are available for you in case you want to use them. If you want to have a meeting with your staff or your department or your grade level, or the science teachers in the 7th grade, you're welcome to borrow any of these slides. Just a thought about teacher leadership too. These 3 quotes came from a conference that I keynoted in 2015. It was not in Virginia, it was in New York. And I was hearing things that I thought were very interesting. These 3 quotes that are on the screen right now. The teachers in New York, or the teachers who were at this conference, had a very clear idea of what a teacher leader was. It was someone who had a title or a clear job role or definition. And in most cases, they were teachers who were being compensated for this. And I am all for compensating teacher leaders. I absolutely am. I think when you're doing more work and you're, accepting more training and you're taking part in leadership activities, you deserve not just credit and a pat on the back for that, but compensation. But I wonder if any of you would like to respond to any of these comments that maybe Kitty can mute you if you wave at her, or put something in the chat box.
Well, before we get there, Lorna had shared that she had a refreshing visit to Albemarle High School outside of Charlottesville, where the principal said quite clearly, we do not talk about SOLs. And then she said, in other words, not important. And Jennifer responded she couldn't even imagine that. And my question was, are you sure that it's not, that meant that it's not important, or there's just nothing to say? Then Lorna says, unfortunately, the first bullet is true in most cases, that someone had to leave before they could get the slot as a teacher. And
Yeah.
Says the first, unfortunately, is very true. So,
yeah,
that's their perspective.
I'm wondering. I'm looking at the second one here. We don't have any teacher leaders at my school, but I wish we did.
Yeah.
In my experience, I was only at a couple of schools, but I was there for a long, long time. There is never a vacuum in teacher leadership. The question is always, which direction are people being led? Is it into positive and productive directions, or because there's always somebody who has a place at the table, or that other people are listening to, somebody who has influence. So, other thoughts on this?
Stephanie has offered that in her case, she's found that the same teachers are asked to take leadership positions over and over. Other teachers need to be given the chance to step up into that role how do you know if someone's a leader if they're never given a chance? And then Raina says she thinks the last bulleted point is representative of formal leadership needing guidance too. And then Lorna's offered a clarification, and I apologize about the dog. I may have to put him in the, hey, you. I may have to put him in the crate. I thought he was, he may not be. Lorna, let's see. Lorna says she thinks Albemarle High School is working on building relationships and seeing what is important to the student instead of the SOLs necessarily. In addition, they're trying a lot of new initiatives that are nationally recognized. Katie Rose says she agrees with Rain. I really enjoyed reading the Katzenmeyer and Mahler advocating for teacher leader professional development. Allison says she thinks the last bullet highlights an interesting dynamic. Sometimes the leaders selected by administration are not always the leaders the staff respond to. Raina says, story of my life, too. Laura says, absolutely agree with Stephanie. It's the responsibility of a teacher leader to develop other leaders. Gail says, if the administration recognizes that teacher leaders exist, they may have to pay them or us more. Katie says, I also think that each teacher leader has their own strengths and philosophies that the principal may not know or know best how to use. And Maria says, haven't been given a chance to be a leader in my building. The same people are chosen for all of the positions. Lorna says, agree with Allison about the last bullet. Sometimes principals are mandated to have teacher leaders. They tend to choose the same ones with the exact same idea. So those are the comments.
Yeah.
And Maria says she agrees. I'm going to run and put the dog in the crate, and I'll be right back.
Okay. Dogs, gotta love them. So who really is shaping education policy these days? We're going to take about the next 5 or 6 minutes and kind of go through 3 quick slides on policy that might give you some different ideas about, and I see that my internet connection is going in and out. I'll try to be slow and clear here. Who is shaping education policy? The great concept around this is that education policy for nearly all of American public school history was local, and states would sometimes have something to say about it, but generally only about structural and systemic policy. Most policy was made in the division or sometimes in the building, and a little bit at the state. Federal policy was almost non-existent, and very seldom did you see columnists or bloggers or comments on newspaper articles about what people thought about education policy. That, of course, has all turned upside down in the last 20 years. There's a whole lot of folks out there who think they know how to fix schools, or think that schools need fixing to begin with, that they're doing a terrible job, and they've been fed this story for a long time. There aren't very many people who would disagree with that. There's this kind of a common belief that the schools have failed. I think you've all been aware of that. So here are 5 ways of looking at policy. And again, these slides will be posted, and there will be some discussion questions about them on Facebook. Generally, when we think about policy, we go right to mandate, a policy that imposes rules and sometimes punishments for people who don't follow the rules. A second major type is inducements, where some reward or certification pay off when conditions are met. Capacity building is everybody's favorite kind of policy because it's about investing in resources. In education, we generally love capacity building, and I will have examples of these on the next slide and ask you to post your own examples. But capacity building is when we offer programs and trainings and money and other resources so that everyone will benefit when we do that. The backside of capacity building is when we're trying to measure how effective that is. System changing policy is when everything turns upside down. Where the way we've always done things, the way we've always funded schools, the way we've always taught math, the way we've always trained teachers, completely turns upside down, and we decide, no, we no longer have to train teachers at colleges and universities, or we no longer have to fund schools through, collecting state taxes, when the whole system changes completely. And persuasion, the other name for persuasion is hortatory. Persuasion is when we try to change people's minds just by presenting information and getting people to change their values. Here are some examples of these, and I apologize if the type is small. Speed limits or mandates, for example. Mandates are all over school policy. Lots and lots of school policies. Yes?
I was going to say, we are not seeing that slide yet, but there it went. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Speed limits are mandates. Lots and lots of school policy looks like a mandate. You will do this or else. This is the way we do things around here. And they often come with negative consequences. An example of an inducement would be race to the top. When states agreed to use Common Core. Does Virginia use the Common Core?
We do not. We're one of the that don't.
Yeah, that's right. You're one of the 7 or 8 states that have
5 or 6, and then a few people unendorsed it. But we were holdouts right from the get-go. I'll tell you more about that.
Yeah, that you're probably lucky. No matter what you think about the Common Core, it's a lot better to have not jumped into it with both feet than to have jumped into it and then to have had your legislators decide, oh no, we don't want this anymore. Yeah. So all this training and all these so the reason 43 states adopted the Common Core was because they became eligible for a federal grant. You couldn't get this federal money unless you adopted the Common Core. And in the end, only 3 or 4 states got the money. So there were a whole lot of states that thought, well, surely we'll get it. But an inducement is I don't want to say it's a nice way to say bribe, but it's when you are promised something for adopting a particular policy. Capacity building, ESEA, which later became No Child Left Behind, and after that has now morphed into ESSA. That began as a federal capacity building initiative in 1965, as did Head Start. They were good ideas where money and training and resources went to solve problems. Head Start is one of the big policies that we've all had experience with, and most people think that it's had some really great outcomes, but you can always find a researcher who will say, yes, Head Start works until the kids get to 4th grade, and then they lose what they got in Head Start. So I personally think that if you get kids to 4th grade with advantages, that's something worth doing, but not everybody does that, or believes in that. So National Board Certification is one of the great capacity building policies. Any state or university or district that offers support for national board does so because they want to build instructional capacity in their teachers. And so that's a capacity building policy, a system changing policy, vouchers, charter schools, Teach for America. We're not going to do things the way we did them before. We're going to disrupt instead of tweak. There's a lot of evidence that disruption is not always good. And finally, persuasive policies. There's no mandate. It's just the idea is we're going to give you the correct information. The best example of this that I can think of is the no smoking campaign. They sometimes work. The percentage of people who are smokers has dropped radically since people, we started seeing those ugly lungs and your mouth is an ashtray commercials. They really do work, persuasive policies. So are there any questions about this? Yeah. This comes into play when we start thinking about what we're doing as a project and how we want to approach that. There are lots and lots of ways to get people to do what you want them to do. So, and if you want to take off the muting of mics, and then people can self-mute if they are in a noisy environment. Should we try that?
You can try that. While they're doing that, there is a question back on the last slide. Laura wanted to know, what was the other word for persuasion?
Hortatory.
Hortatory.
Hortatory. Hortatory. And the easiest way to remember that is if you exhort someone to do something, EXHORT, or exhort, so that's hortatory. Again, these slides are available to you because I think they're worth thinking about.
Okay.
So.
Lorna made a comment that I would like to address, and what she said was, we have SOL that makes us exempt, as in exempt from Common Core, and that's not quite right. The reason we did not choose Common Core was not just because we had SOLs, although that was a primary reason. The primary reason was that our superintendent of instruction at the time, Dr. Patricia Wright, was so determined that the SOLs in Virginia were more rigorous, her words, which she used often to describe the difference between SOLs in Virginia and Common Core, that she was a pretty much a power force of one who got the Board of Education to adopt the attitude that we would be going backwards instead of forwards if we adopted Common Core as opposed to the standards of learning. I believe the real reason was that we had already invested so much money in the assessments that go along with our SOLs that it would have been tremendously expensive for us. A lot of the states that adopted Common Core adopted it in the absence of having anything else really yet in place. And Virginia was one of the leaders in the standards movement. We started SOLs back in the mid-90s, almost ahead of anybody else. In fact, I can remember when Lynn Cheney was holding up the Virginia Standards of Learning before Congress, convincing them that we were the leader in that area. So just to make sure that everybody understands that, yes, we don't have Common Core, and yes, we do have SOL, but it's not necessarily because SOLs made us automatically exempt. Then Sarah hopped on it. She had a question from earlier, and that was concerns around going on at school about the lack of accountability for students and parents that there was an unfair portion of onus being placed on the teachers in the schools when kids didn't do what they were supposed to, and then there were some amens to that. A couple more comments about Common Core, and I think why don't we let people jump in at that point and either repeat what they've said in the chat or bring up something new. So unmute.
Yeah.
Scroll past, across your name, then click on unmute to unmute yourself. If you're in a noisy, as Nancy said, if you're in a noisy environment, keep yourself muted until you want to speak, but you can unmute yourself so that you can speak in turn. So who wants to go first? Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Who is
Gail?
No.
No.
It's not.
Okay.
Is it somebody on the phone maybe instead of on their computer who wants to speak? Or maybe nobody wants to speak.
Kitty, could
Yeah.
you restate the question briefly?
Which
I'm
question is
it's
that?
the one that we're supposed to be commenting on because there's so much on the screen right now.
Oh, it was just in general from the last
Okay.
screen or this screen or any comments around how Virginia didn't adopt Common Core and kept with the SOLs instead. That was what I was explaining.
I would like to say that I think that everything is so confusing. I know we've been talking a lot about whether you were brought up in a strong paternal, the man makes a decision, you're fatherly, type of, whether it was your mom or your dad. But I heard this applied to Donald Trump and whatever. My brain is completely off topic right now. But anyways, and so they were saying some people really like that. The management should come down from the top, just tell us what we need to do and we will do it. And now it's not like that. It's like an open field. Everything is possible. No one is really taking a strong stand and telling us, let's do this, let's make this work. This is going to be great. Let's break it down. And it's very confusing for me. I get a stomach ache when I think about SOLs, blame for SOL. Like nobody thinks out the long-term effects of what's going to happen if we pick any of the examples.
So you're just
Yeah.
overwhelmed with the whole change agent thing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just think I see how when you have the federal government makes a great policy. It's a great idea. Then you need to implement it. Then you need to check up on it. Then you need to punish the people who don't follow it. Then you need to find a target for the reason that people aren't achieving when the policy was so great to start with. And then it just trickles down in a very ugly way instead of in a very productive and blossoming type of way. I don't know. I'm looking at these other policies and thinking, how great something else would be, but it's like we're stuck in SOL land right now. But I teach Spanish, so I don't have to worry about that, but my school is not high achieving, so I'm always worried about it.
Right.
I found your short history lesson to be really enlightening. I had heard before that the SOLs were considered more rigorous, but I didn't realize there was a single person, the superintendent of Virginia's education,
a single person
behind that.
That's been my perspective. I was there during a lot of that tension between Dr. Wright and Arne Duncan, who was the Secretary of Education at the federal level. And so that may be a somewhat skewed impression because I was up close and personal. But that was my impression. And I remember her telling me in particular that she had taken a call from Arne Duncan himself. He was asking her, what can we do to get Virginia on board with some of these Race to the Top initiatives? And that she told him flat out, I'll go along with just about anything except making Common Core mandatory. Now, those were her words to me in a meeting with one other person. So
But I
that's
think
what my
it's really
impression
important as a teacher leader, and of course she had a very formal position, but to advocate for what you think is right, even if it was a money-driven decision for the fact that we'd already invested in Pearson's testing SOL system, the fact that the Virginia education system didn't have to make that change. Teachers hate change.
Well, we've already been through a lot of it.
So, there's, Gail was saying, it's so confusing, but having talked to teachers in states where they didn't have a system before Common Core, or even if they did have a system before Common Core, to have to make a complete change. I wasn't a teacher before. I'm young enough. I took SOL starting in 3rd grade.
I got you.
So I can't imagine a world without them. I'm so glad we didn't have to make that change, though. And to try to make changes within that construct, I'd rather make changes within the system we already have than completely overhaul it and be screwed over.
Somebody made the comment, and I forgot now who it was, that they're from New York, where the Common Core is a mess. I don't remember now who it was, but that someone made that observation. So I don't know. Raina moved from New York to Virginia last year. She says it's been devastating in New York.
Well, I would have to agree with Katie. I'm just thinking sure, money may have been a part of it, but not just money at the state level, the local levels, the amount of training and preparation for switching over with the cross-curricular and Common Core. And we think about what we've gone through in Chesterfield with the new grading system, new computer systems, new initiatives with PBLs and everything else hitting at the same time. And now to suddenly say, oh, now we have to have engineering and we have to have all this other aspects in your subject would have been overwhelming. And they might have been facing a bigger teacher shortage. And that's a problem. So, or the higher stress levels. I do think there was a bigger picture than just paying for Pearson, because no matter what standard you use, it's still a standard of learning. You can call it Common Core or you can call it SOL. It's certain standards that have to be taught. And then somebody's going to say, how are you measuring those? And that's basically, I know a lot of times when I think of SOLs, we think of the test, but basically no matter if it's Common Core or an SOL, there's going to be some sort of measurement teachers and students are going to be held accountable to, more so the teachers.
And to get back to what Nancy was talking about earlier, where some of these policies come from, the General Assembly, if we had, I think, gone toward Common Core, the General Assembly would have probably yanked us back. So we would have been in the same confusing place that some states are, because the General Assembly has attempted in the last session to pass a law that would make it illegal for any future Board of Education to adopt Common Core. So they've adopted the more hardline position that Common Core never here in Virginia. So it gets to be interesting.
Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I've done a lot of studying comparison between SOLs and Common Core in some of my studies for my EDS. And the Virginia SOLs, I think, far outweigh the Common Core. Common Core is not specific at all, and SOLs really hone in on standards and skills. And so aside from money and all that stuff, I really do think that Virginia thought they had a set of standards that were above what Common Core had to offer. And so I feel like they felt like the education system would be better off staying with what we had and see how the Common Core panned out, and jumping the ship or jumping into the ship with Common Core and then regretting it.
That was certainly Dr. Wright's
Question.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So, we're talking about SOLs versus Common Cores, but, basically these speed limits, race to the top, capacity, these policies, but it seems to me that most of the way any of these policies work, whether they're a mandate or an inducement, is through money. Is there any way that capacity building, like you get an extra stipend if you're nationally board certified, and you get more money if your kids are passing their SOLs and you're in jeopardy. Like, is there any other carrot, or like is there any other motivator for change besides money?
Can I chime in?
Well, yes.
Okay, this is Lorna. I was listening to everyone. I've been around for a long time. I was around when passport literacy was in the middle school, that you had to pass passport literacy tests to go to high school. I was one of the in a pilot school that had SOLs to begin with. I understand the need for them. I understand the need for the standards. However, one of the difficult things that I find is that they keep adding more and more standards, and they don't take anything away. And so when you're trying to figure out what you're teaching, and it's called end of course test, and in high school, we test at the beginning of May. We have a month and a half left of school. So it's very difficult to make it to be an end of course test when they keep adding more and not taking anything away. But back to what Katie was talking about, I do not have a choice of who's in my classroom. I do not go to guidance and say, oh, I only want the kids that pass the SOL so that I can get a stipend when all my kids pass. I don't, as a teacher and as a teacher leader, as a professional, you take the kids where they are and you move them as far as possible as you can. And to me, that's what the SOL should do. You should be able to test an SOL test in the fall. You get the same test in the spring, and you see how far they've moved. To tie it in to graduation and to tie it into accreditation, when a kid graduates from high school and they're not going to college, what does the SOL tell them about what kind of workforce readiness that they had? There's nothing. Oh, well, I passed my English SOL. Well, good. So do you know how to do this? So there's no correlation between getting a kid ready for outside of high school other than, oh, you passed the standard. Oh, no, you didn't. You didn't pass the standard. And, I can go on and on and on about, I see the good in it, but I see the bad in it when schools are not accredited and everybody looks at them and the principals. We had principals in Chesterfield that couldn't take it anymore. I almost had a nervous breakdown because everything was put on them. Teachers wouldn't do what they wanted, or they try to do it. There's only so far that you can go. So I could see the standards helping, but again, it's very difficult when it should be a before and after. How far did I take them versus, oh, how many did you pass? So that's how I feel.
I think I am pretty convinced that you are preaching to the choir here. And that I see lots of nodding heads. And the purpose of this course is to see where we can apply some of these levers. I really liked Katie's comment about, doesn't this always boil down to money? And a lot of times it does, although and I want to talk about national board certification very briefly, and then we're going to bring Mary on. But there are actually states where there is no stipend for national board certification, and teachers pay for it out of their own pocket. And there are still people who do that because they want so much to have this badge of professional practice. And so it doesn't always take money, but almost always it boils down to that. And when you talk to people who are policy makers, who are not educators, they almost always want to include some kind of inducement, some payoff for people. And so I just checked the
offer that,
go ahead.
The change has been that in the early days of SOLs, the conversation was all about punishing those schools that didn't succeed,
Mhm.
the idea of inducements for those schools or rewards for those schools that did succeed came much later. So the initial impulse of the General Assembly and the Board of Education members was, how do we punish? What punishment will work so we make sure that everybody's in compliance with SOL? So that's how far we've come in talking
Yeah.
about inducements.
Yeah. I saw on the participant list that Mary Tedrow was here. I want to move to chatting with Mary right now, and I hope you will all have some questions for her. Mary, can you say something into your mic to make sure we've got you queued up here?
Yeah, hi, thank you. It's been fun listening to this SOL discussion. One I've had many, many times with colleagues in many different settings. Hi, Kitty, Nancy, it's nice to see you.
I thought it would be fun to start out with a quote here from Mary. Mary wrote this in a blog about 2 or 3 years ago. Do you recognize this? Mary and I were actually, yeah, the prize pig. Mary and I were actually, that came from another Virginia teacher, Susan Graham. I don't know if any of you know Susan. Yeah, yeah. And we were meeting to put the outlines of this teacher's change agent course together. We were both on that team, and I thought this was a good one about prize-winning teachers. It's nice to have a title and a pat on the head, but it's a lot more important to have influence and to be able to change some things. So I sent Mary a list of questions earlier today, and she took a look at them and said she would be willing to respond to these, and maybe we can stop at the end of each slide, and if folks have questions, they can pop right in and ask Mary. So take it away, Mary.
Okay, so I thought these were great questions. I had to think about them for a little while. In terms of leadership, my real leadership role is in the classroom. And since I've recently left the classroom, I realize how much I miss that role, being in front of young people and actually having an opportunity to change their work or impact their lives or their views about themselves. So has always been the most satisfying. In fact, I miss it so much that I'm going to teach at the junior college next semester. They asked, and I said, really? So I guess in hindsight, I have to say that leading young people has been the most important work to me. And it was a reason why I didn't want to leave the classroom. I never aspired to anything beyond lead teacher for my department. I did not want to be in administration. I already had seen that job and did not want to do it. And I have a very strong feeling that teachers are undervalued, underappreciated, and that our work is intensely intellectual, complex, dynamic, changes all the time, and not everyone can do it. And so after I got national boards, I was asked to participate in a teacher leader group virtually, which was extremely exciting work for me because we were talking about creating a very professional group of elevating teachers to the role of professions like doctors and lawyers and owning our own work and making sure that we were in on the policy making. Let's see, the greatest changes in the profession or in my classroom had to come through the National Writing Project. I think that was the place where I discovered my own affection for being considered a professional, being asked what I had learned in the classroom, and sharing that with my peers and feeling that I had something to offer. I think most people are in the teaching profession because we like being needed, and we think we have ideas and methods of sharing, and when we get the opportunity to share, I get no greater satisfaction than that. And my husband, who's always saying like, why are you doing that? I said, because I like it. This is the thing that makes me feel fulfilled, that someone's asked for my help and I can help, whether it's a student or a peer or, you know, just being asked about our profession in general. So the greatest change in my teaching came through the National Writing Project. And that was because we sat in a room and I talked to other teachers who were experts at what they were doing. And we shared with each other. And when I tried something that worked, it was like a drug and I wanted more. I wanted to be with other teachers, and I never got that from I'm sorry to say that I never got that from my supervisors. They didn't change my teaching at all. They monitored my teaching, but they did not have any suggestions for me or even usable feedback. So working with teachers has been satisfying and rewarding. And I think what I'm most proudest of is that we have finally established a writing project site in my hometown, which I just left the classroom so I could direct full time. And that was another difficult decision because I didn't want to lose contact with the dynamism of the classroom that keeps me thinking and planning and trying to figure out what's good for kids. In terms of what lessons I've learned, a sad one for me has been that I don't think I'm going to see in my lifetime what I think kids need, which is a professional teaching force. I think it's best for what happens in the classroom. Everything happens between a teacher and a student. Everything happens between you and the kids in your classroom. Whatever is going on outside of your classroom, they have a minimal effect. And so for that reason, I think that we need to own and run our own profession. I don't think I'm going to see it. I'm sorry about that. I talked to a peer about 2 years ago and I said, the only thing we can do is hand it off to the next group. So that's what I expend all my energy on, trying to help the teachers who are behind me understand that your best friend is the person teaching next to you. And the two of you together are greater than any one of you independently. And that person who's working with kids, just like yours, they have the key that will resolve an issue that you have, and that we need time and space for those discussions. In fact, I'm doing work right now with a middle school. They keep carving out time for them. And I told the assistant superintendent, I said, what they really need is less time in front of kids. And I firmly believe that. I think the work that teachers do together is very important to what happens in the classroom, and that when you have a lesson that works all the time, that hits most of the kids because it's a honed jewel, because you've worked it out with your peers, that's worth having. And I think that's what teachers need. They need more time. And we don't need tests. I'm sorry, I listened to you all and I was like, I don't see any benefit from the SOL test. None. They've done nothing but pervert things that happen in my classroom. Questions?
And that's what you call a disruptor.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Sorry,
Allison, yes.
No, I'll join in. I agree with you. I feel like we've just left this whole idea of quality teaching to create quality teaching. However, the new quality teaching is based on test scores and data collection and accountability. And I agree in some sense that all of those things are important in their own way. However, I feel like, I mean, I just posted this on the blog, I feel like I was a better teacher before I had to do all of that. Yet they're creating all of these things to make me a better teacher, but it's not making me a better teacher. It's just making me more accountable. And to that point, you know, we do question, okay, hiring the standards of teachers and raising the bar. I get all of that. But my worry is that we've gone so far from what we know what works that we don't know what works anymore, because we feel the pressure to do all of the new things and the new initiatives and the new plans and the new trainings and the new whatever, that it's just taking us so far removed from what we actually would consider.
If I can respond to a comment that you made about what we know is good teaching. You aren't going to get from the people above you what you want.
Right.
Teacher leadership is a threat to an established system. And your best defense is knowing your work inside and out, and basically talking back and saying, this is not good for my students. I mean, we are I hate to use wartime, but we're with children all day long, and we're not turning out widgets, we're turning out human beings. And I think when we see the effect on those very tender human beings in front of us, that it's our professional responsibility to say that is enough.
Right.
And I'm not convinced that teachers are yet ready to speak with one voice, but because the way the system is structured, we're really at the bottom. We're told we're powerless, but you really are not. You're very powerful when you speak what is right, because everybody in the room knows it's right. I mean, they know it's right. If you speak the truth, it'll shut them up, because I've done it before, and the whole room gets quiet. You're like, remember why we're here? You remember what we're doing, and anything that pulls me away from that is getting in the way of my work. So that's where I'm not convinced I'll see what I hoped for when I went through the national boards, which is that the teachers would own it. And that means I've done my work, I've done my homework, I know these kids, and I know what's right for them. And all this other garbage is getting in the way.
I totally agree with you. Yep. I just renewed my national board, and that was part of one of my reflections.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But that was part of one of my reflections, was that, you know, we just keep adding and adding and adding all of these new initiatives when we need to.
We don't.
No, we don't.
By that, you and I.
That's true.
I was an English teacher. My kids need to be better readers, writers, and thinkers. That's it.
Well, an important thing to think about, you know, I work with a lot of student teachers, and I work at VCU with people who are training and to be cooperating teachers and university supervisors. And I have a student teacher right now, and what I told her just today was, listen, here are the things that we need to get done because we are supposed to. And then here are some of the things that I'm doing because they're just right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think it's a hard line when you're teaching people who are going to be educators to really find that balance, because it is very difficult to find the balance between all of the requirements and just what you in your heart and your experience and your knowledge knows what's best for children.
Yep.
Right.
Well, it seems like
there is an ethical response.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a profession, you usually take a code of ethics, and I think do no harm to the kids is probably first on the list. Laura?
Well, I was just thinking
other
part of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of this is, you know, we sit there and we say, we know, and we're trying to see growth in our students. But again, the people who are determining, there are people outside of us who are determining what measures growth. And so they're constantly putting those new constraints on. I mean, if you think about it, you know, we had to take a class as part of this cohort on how to basically prove that we're doing the right thing in our instruction. You know, when we did our action plans, we were coming up with a way of studying and then going through and modifying it. and then going back and finding data to match that that particular plan worked. Even though we could see growth, it was, just trying to say, okay, teacher research is valid research, as opposed to saying we have to have an outside company come in and give us the research. I think there's so much out there that everybody wants an outside company and they see it as a piece of, and then we're going back to the money issue of that money pie. Oh, we can get part of that to prove that this is an effective plan. And if we can get a county to buy into this effective plan, then we've done something. And it's not in with what we're talking about as far as what is right for the kids.
Yeah, I sadly think that the thing that's measurable doesn't always matter. So.
And I think what's being measured is not really what's being taught. It's like they have not found a way to effectively measure what is being taught. Because when we look at a lot of the things, one of the biggest transitions I see for the students from 5th to 6th grade in science is, I always hear, oh, they were so good in science last year. Well, last year they were only memorizing. This year they're applying. And so it is difficult because you're having to teach them how to go beyond memory.
Well, that's where we should own the tools as well, and they have to go beyond these narrow tests. And I remember before the SOLs, that shows my age, and we had diagnostic tests, which I thought were extremely valuable. In Virginia, we used the Stanford 9. And so I could go, when I had a question about a student, I could go to guidance and look at the test scores and go, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Those went away. All I had was SL scores, which are criterion referenced. And the only thing they told me was if they failed them last year, they were probably more likely to fail them this year. And for the most part, I ignored them and looked at I did what was, you always have to, you can't be insubordinate. But I did ignore them as best I could because it was just too out of my control to worry about them. I had kids in front of me to worry about.
Yeah,
I was a department chair and they'd say, I got a kid who just came to America. They can barely speak English and they have to take the test. And I said, they're not going to pass the test. He goes, so what should I do? I said, forget about it. That's an impossible test. Forget about it. Do the best you can.
Yes. Other comments and questions for Mary before we move along to the next set of questions? Anyone? This is great. I love this. So here's some more things to chew on.
Well, I do think I see a distinction between teacher leadership and teacher professionalism. Ideally, every teacher is a professional. They know what their job is. They know their content. They understand their children. And if they don't know the best way to get to the content to the children, they know how to get help, like who to ask or at least who to start asking. And I don't think that ever ends. At least for me, it never has. I've been reading your side comments about some of the challenges that you have with students in your classroom now. I recognize most of those worries, but that just means that you have a new classroom puzzle in front of you and another new way to try to engage those kids and bring them into learning as best you can. So for that, I was always asking someone else. Last year, for the first time, I had a group of newcomers that most of them did not speak English. And the foreign language department became my best friend. I was in their hallway all year. Like, how do you get them to do this? How can I get them to do that? So if you're not questioning, you're pretty stagnant. And I think that's true in every profession. I mean, there's not a doctor or lawyer out there who isn't keeping up with what's going on. And I see that as part of your professional stature. In terms of teacher leadership, as I said before, I think teachers are leaders. I mean, if you model something, when I first started silent sustained reading and I modeled it and they picked up their books and copied me, I was like, this is a very powerful thing that I am doing here in front of my students. So that made me very aware that they were watching you all the time, whether you are aware of it or not, and they're taking their cues from you. So you are a leader in the classroom. But there are many ways to be a teacher leader. So that's where it gets kind of hazy. There are some people I think who are perfectly willing to accept just that role of teacher as leader in the classroom, and they're satisfied with that. And others have other itches they want to scratch. But I still think that the teacher should be seen with a capital T in the building and the system. So what changes have you seen in teacher leaders over the last 15 years? Not enough. Things are getting better and instead of worse in some ways. But I am in despair right now over the teacher shortage. I think that, I think in that respect, teacher as professional is much worse than it has been. And there's a whole slew of reasons for that. Probably, I don't know if any of you saw the movie The Big Short, but at the end of it, they said, they do what they always do, they blame the teachers, which is really what happens. And they also kill them in a revolution too. They're the first ones to get killed because you don't want anybody out there thinking. And that's what we try to do. So I think I'm hoping we're coming to the end of a very bad time. But that's showing that people are choosing not to teach. And I think the job has gotten very high pressure. I heard you all talking about the shifting field of expectations that can be confusing and stressful. I've experienced that myself. But I did have places where I could go to. The writing project was a place I always went back to have my cup filled, because when I was with those people, all we talked about was teaching and not, well, for the most part, all we talked about was teaching. And that was refreshing. Let's see, more consolidated definition of understanding teachers as leaders. Well, I would say that yes, there is more of a consolidated definition of teachers as leaders. It's been discussed a lot. I don't think that has quite been watered down yet, like some things do. Like a professional learning community, to me, is what the National Writing Project has been. What my administrative team called it was some animal I did not recognize, because we were being told what to do rather than being asked what we wanted to work on. So that term has been watered down. I don't think teacher leadership has been co-opted yet. And we have to be very vigilant that it isn't, because I won't be happy until the pyramid's been flipped upside down and the teachers are up at the top of the pile instead. Will that ever happen? I don't know. Research done told us that expert teachers felt that they did not feel comfortable with policy. Sadly, I don't think that has changed either, because policy is a lot like politics, and people are afraid of politics. If we ever do get a profession of our own, the biggest fights will probably be amongst ourselves. And I think that we would be naive if we didn't anticipate that there wouldn't be a lot of discussion about, the nitpicky things as we went along. I'm reading the book Hamilton right now, and apparently that's never changed. So we've all been, politics are messy. It's getting a lot of people together to try to agree, and you can't get consensus easily. So I think that's why teachers shy away from that it is contentious. So, but all you need is you need 60%, 50%, something. You don't need everybody to get it going.
Yeah. I'm thinking here, when I think about teacher professionalism, about other occupations that that no one argues are not professionals. Doctors and lawyers, of course, and architects and accountants and We don't say to our accountant, this is how we want our money to be, or to our architect, this is how I want the building to be built, because we know they have those things. But true profession has autonomy, and it has the option of being the gateway and being the accountability master. I think it was Allison who talked about accountability, and that's, a word that we all understand now, but the people who are forcing teacher accountability are not, for the most part, educators. There's somebody out there who has taken away our classroom work, instruction, curriculum, assessment, mentoring, all of those things that you need to be in control of to be a professional. When I talk these days, and I'm interested in hearing what you think about this, but when I talk these days about teacher leadership, I often call it teacher professionalism, because lately I've been thinking that teacher leadership has been kind of redefined as this role where you're carrying water for a particular program or a particular initiative. And, we're going to get our teacher leaders to teach third graders how to read. That's what it is right now in my state. We're going to get our teacher leaders to fix literacy, in K2. And I think, well, maybe they don't want to do that. And maybe what we need instead is autonomy for early literacy teachers. But do you have any thoughts about that? I really liked what you said about teacher professionalism, because it was very classroom based, but any thoughts about teacher professionalism as autonomy and control over our own work?
Well, one thing you said really resonates with me, because, I've worked with younger teachers and they don't expect that they would be the ultimate determination of how well a student has performed, but that was our work and it was taken from us. I used to laugh, with the AP test, the kids would come back and say, wow, I did really well. And I'd say yes, as opposed to when I told you you were doing well. My voice as an evaluator was taken away from me until they had it verified by some number somewhere else. It didn't mean as much, but that was our work. It was presenting the work and scaffolding or assisting the kids to getting there and recognizing when they mastered their work. I do also kind of agree that I understand your point about teacher leadership being taken a bit from us, because it is that prize pig thing. Well, we had a teacher on the committee, and so that's our rubber stamp that this policy is okay. They didn't say that whatever the teacher brought up was discounted, or there was no real quorum of teachers. So in some ways, yes, and I have seen my own district name people teacher leaders. In fact, it was a position I interviewed for, but the real role was testing coordinator. And I was like, since when is that a teacher leader? So that was not my definition of teacher leadership. So you do have to watch who's controlling the language.
Yeah. Other questions on any of this from anyone? Just jump right in. Okay, one last set here. All right. I understand from Google this is the Virginia State House. So
they all kind of look alike.
They all do, yes. They're all kind of, give me some columns and we know it's government. So this is a little bit about policy making. Have you jumped into that at all?
Yes, some of, well, not making policy, but talking to those who are governing about policy. And I made it a practice to go see the candidates and ask them about to bring up education, because it is rarely brought up by the politicians themselves. And in terms of Virginia, I've talked to Tim Kaine on a number of occasions. He's somewhat sympathetic to our profession, but he's not informed. And so it's our job to kind of inform them. I told him that in April, I said, well, that 50% of the students are impoverished. And he said, oh, in Winchester. And I said, no, in the nation. And you need to do something about that, because that is what is keeping them from accessing knowledge. So our role as educators, I think, is continually to educate. But you need to approach these people as parents and grandparents and make it as personal as you possibly can. Ask them, do you have grandchildren? Do you want your 5-year-old grandchild to be tested so that the teacher's job is ensured? Do you want your 5-year-old to be tested at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, at the end of the year? Is this the view of education that you have for that child that you love? And on a number of occasions, it has stopped them cold because they don't want that. They remember their own childhood. They remember school as being sometimes fun, engaging, and they can't imagine seeing a 5-year-old being tested like that, which is what at times has been proposed in our state. So you need to tell stories, talk about a specific child, talk about the days when kids are hungry, but you're being pressured to get through material, the days when, somebody's lost a parent or a relative, but the God Almighty SOLs have to be dealt with. I think you can approach any other human being at a very humane level and probably impact them.
Yeah. Questions?
I put them all to sleep.
No.
No.
It is a school night.
Yes, I know.
I'm sitting here thinking, during my years at the VEA, I was intimately involved with all of the legislators who were making these decisions, and I saw firsthand and up close how hard the VEA lobbyists, we often want to badmouth the lobbyists, but there are lobbyists who are doing good work too, and the VEA lobbyists, in my opinion, fall into that category, along with lobbyists from the other organizations that are all pro-public education, pro-child, pro-quality teacher programs. And I left that 4-year experience physically, mentally, emotionally wrung out because I was so worn out with the constant demeaning, disrespecting, disingenuous approach to, people who didn't even understand what we were doing every day, don't appreciate what we're doing, because what they really like to do at the end of the day is dismantle public education and turn everything over to the private sector, let charter schools take over, let vouchers become the rule of the day, turn everything that's not dealt with through charters or vouchers over to virtual schools. And one of my frustrations is that so few teachers really understood what was at stake when they went to vote. They often vote on things other than education issues because they don't even understand all of the education issues that are at stake. And so when we talk about policy, It's important for teachers to understand where these policies come from and what the nexus is between not just the administrators at the school level. They're just implementing the policies that have been passed by the General Assembly and crafted into mandates at the Department of Education level. And so that's when I see those columns on that building, that's what comes up for me. That it was a hateful place to be, frankly. And I had a reporter say to me one day, in all honesty, she said, "Do you think these people even care about anybody's kids but their own?" And I said, "Well, you said that, I didn't." And she said, "Well, that's what it sounds like. They don't care about anybody's kids but their own." And that was a major level of frustration for me. And if I sound bitter, I'm sorry, but here I am 4 years later. I'm coaching the teachers that are burnt out and unable to see themselves being able to do this work for another 20 years given the current system. And I'm helping them figure out a way out. And I never thought I would be at this spot in my life. But I understand it, so I'm helping them out. I don't want them in the classroom if they're burnt out. They're going to do something harmful to students or to themselves, and I want them out before that happens. But I get calls every day from someone somewhere in the country saying, "I found you and I need to talk to you because I don't think I can do this anymore."
Wow. I'm circling back to something you said about school leaders and administrators. One of the things that people are going to be asked to do in this course is to either write a blog or interview a policymaker. And with other courses, other groups that I've worked with, nobody wants to interview a policymaker. It feels really scary to them, and it's not really. But I always point out that policymakers are not just legislators. They're also school leaders, superintendents, principals, the president of the school board, in your local division, people, and they might be people that and it's good to kind of get a sense of where they're coming from. My thought recently is that school leaders, superintendents and principals, for the most part, want to do the right things. They know that there's too much testing. They know that they're harming kids. They know that their good teachers are frustrated and unable to do the things that made them good teachers. And so they might be our best friends. If we could bring school leaders and teachers together, we would have a pretty powerful force against bad policies. Maybe that's just being a Pollyanna, and maybe you would like to be sticking pins into your superintendent doll. But I think that most school leaders at least started out from the right place, because most of them were educators at one time, and they did it not to be powerful and not to be punitive and not to crack down, but to educate kids. And so so maybe that's a leverage point in policy making, that you don't have to necessarily go to your state senator or whatever.
Well, and there's some good people that people can talk to. And there's good people on the State Board of Education, and Dr. Canaday would certainly be one that if anybody could interview him, they would have a delightful time. And he's retired now, so he may have time to talk to some people.
Well, I think it was Susan Graham maybe who said assume good intentions. And I think that's the best way to approach anyone. And I don't want to leave the impression that my administrators were bad people. They certainly weren't. I just don't think they knew my job as well as my peers did, because they left the classroom for other reasons, because the job of administration is not the same as a classroom teacher. So that's where I felt the best feedback I got was from other classroom teachers. So it wasn't that they were being evil. But I do agree that, there isn't anybody who's still in education who doesn't have the child as the primary focus. And I think in some ways the administration is caught in a vice. But I also blame them too, because I don't think they gave enough pushback. I don't think my superintendents pushed back hard enough. I don't think my school board pushed back hard enough. And they had the space in their day to do that when classroom teachers do not. To get a classroom teacher to agree to come to a school board meeting and speak for 3 minutes is a huge undertaking for many of them, and intimidating as well. But I think when you go to interview somebody who is involved in policy, you should start assuming that they could be doing this all for the right reasons. And of course, that's one of the themes we always covered, the law of unintended consequences. Perhaps they don't realize the unintended consequences that their current policy has brought into the classroom. And there have been many. In my career, to send seniors out at the end of the year was getting harder and harder, because it was clear to me that they knew less and less. They'd been pushed over the standard bar so quickly that their knowledge did not go deeply and did not last long. And I was starting to feel like their diplomas were fraudulent in many cases. On the plus side, though, in Virginia, the new focus on the CTE program, so that kids are now not all focused solely on academics. I said it's about time. I think we've bored enough of them to death, cramming facts and figures into their heads and give them something to do with their hearts and minds and hands is a good step in the right direction. So I applaud that. And our governor was instrumental in making sure that, there's a focus again on career and technical education.
Can I say something on that, Mary? And this is Lorna. I've always been a proponent of the CTE track. However, when you look at what certification has to be to become CTE certified, I think my concern with that is that the CTE people that they have to hire for this new state diploma that they're looking at this time is going to be an issue for a lot of our areas.
Like who are we going to find to teach these courses?
That is correct. I'm involved with a specialty center at my high school, and we had to hire a physical therapist to teach a PT class. Well, I understand that. She's learning how to teach, which is good. We have a certified athletic trainer teaching a sports medicine class. She also has a phys ed education degree. So we were lucky to find those people to fill those spots. I can teach any science 6 through 12 in the state of Virginia, but physics, and I have taught all of those. There's a class that I was looking to add. It's called material science, but it needs to be taught in conjunction with a CTE teacher. I was told emphatically, you could add new classes, but you're not getting any money for it, and you're not getting any extra FTEs. And so it's very frustrating, because you have these ideas that students would be interested in, but again, it boils down to money. So as a teacher, I kind of think about, are we educating students so they can be a worthwhile and productive member of society? Is that more important? Or are you going to every time something comes up, it's going to cost money. So no, we can't do it. So I got frustrated with that. But I'm well aware of the CTE. We've been talking about it for the last 2 or 3 years in our county, at least on the high school level. I think that is a good thing that we're doing that. To me, we are retrofitting our diploma, because I do believe I graduated from Chesterfield in 1980. And I know back in the late 70s and the 70s, we had diplomas where young men and women went to a real tech center and learned bricklaying and electrician and plumbing. And so
I did that. I was a secretary.
We really need to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
We had that in our school. We didn't have to leave to go to do it. It was in the building.
Yeah.
And now they have to leave their building to go to it.
Yeah. We have just a couple things, and I'm going to try to get us out of here as promised in the next 5 minutes. And so I'd like to thank Mary and bravo. It's always wonderful to talk to Mary. I always learn something, and I wish I could do it every day. So, so thank you, Mary, very much for sharing the evening with us. I pulled this quote from Nicole Sanchez-Co, one of our course participants, and I really loved what she had to say here. As the years have flown by, I've been asked to take on more and more responsibilities. I haven't thought about my impact on policy ever. So I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone and look at my leadership potential in a different light. I love that, Nicole. Thank you for writing that. I should mention that she followed that quote up by saying, and my husband keeps saying to me, and what are you going to be paid for this? I thought that's the other part of it. Yes. So our question tonight is how we find the balance between taking risks and acting on our deepest beliefs as professional teachers. What's worth sticking our neck out and spending our time on, and what issues are not the right kind of change. So you can kind of let that hang there. I wanted to mention to all of you that I posted on the Facebook page today, and in the files section there, a list of some of the things that other teachers have done as their culminating project. It's quite a varied list. There are some really simple things that people have done, like starting a homework club after school with volunteers that eventually got funded, and some of them are bigger and more complex and involve talking to legislators and things. So there's kind of a variety, and you can take a look at those to see what other people have done. Does anybody have any questions right now? This is a time when you are, should be thinking about, again, what's bubbling up in your building or your classroom or your division. Questions about that?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a question, or if you have one that you want to ask, you can always email or call me, or share that with Kitty if that's something you're more comfortable with. But there's a collection of ideas there. We will not be meeting by webinar again until January, when we will probably have about 3 feet of snow here, and that's not a joke. That's just about what we usually have by January 10th. Many, many inches of snow. Hopefully you won't have that. Climate change. The good news is that the election will be over in January. It'll be safe to go back to the internet and television. So I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to pulling down the things that you wrote in the comment box to read them, which I can't do during the thing. And again, thank you so much to Mary for coming and sharing some thoughts with us tonight. I am done. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The recording will be available in the next little while. I'll work on getting that uploaded and sent off to Nancy shortly. So I'm going to hit this.
Wonderful. Thank you.